Hey, I'm Brooke Halliday, licensed professional clinical counselor and your host of Coloring Outside the Lines. I believe that we are the byproducts of our experiences and the environments in which we were raised, and most of us have earned a few scars from those things over the years. I've been making it my mission to help people learn to accept themselves and have compassion for everything that they've survived. Through deep and vulnerable conversations with some amazing women, you're going to hear about major moments in their life when they chose to color outside the lines and demonstrate firsthand just how capable we all are. So get ready to be inspired as we color outside the lines and make something beautiful. This week, we are wrapping up Becca's story about the loss of her son. If you haven't listened to part 1, make sure you go back and listen to that before proceeding with this episode.
Oh, yeah. The days following were like the worst. The months following were the worst. Coming home to all of his things here was something that I don't think that people think about.
Right.
We came home and his room was ready for him. My hospital bag was packed before all of this because I was 2 weeks away from my due date. And so I thought, we thought obviously we were going to be bringing a baby home.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, that was just the worst thing ever. Like coming home, and I remember my husband Dan telling me just go lay down. I'm going to start packing things up because there are traces of baby everywhere. His swing is in the living room. The bottles are in our kitchen, so he started packing things up and would later tell me that that was something that he wished he didn't just come home and do right away, because he was super emotional, obviously, doing that alone too. We left his room up though for a long time. We actually didn't change anything in his room or touch anything until we got pregnant again.
Did you ever go in there?
So for a while, I can't remember the timeline, but we shut the blinds and we just shut the door and didn't really go in there for a while. But as time went on, I would say probably a couple months, I started going in there more to cry, to just grieve and really be with him as much as possible, in my element. And then even as time went, that was our favorite room, we put so much hard work into his nursery. And so I feel we both were this is our favorite room. And yeah, I started actually doing yoga and meditation in there, just as time went on. And I think, yeah, it became kind of a healing space for me because I wanted it to be a positive space. For me, I needed connection with other people during that time. And so I sought out a lot of information on Facebook groups and just searching for other people who had experienced a similar loss. We were looking for answers as to why he passed away.
Yeah,
And
I was just going to ask, do doctors know what happened exactly? Was anything preventable?
so what they ended up finding out, basically the first phone call I got from my doctor afterwards was that they tested my blood, and now I can't remember the name of it, but basically they found that because we have different blood types, Cal and I, they found milligrams of his blood in my blood, which normally you find traces of baby's blood in the mom's blood. So normally there's 10 milligrams or less of baby's blood in the mom's blood. And that's how they test for different things, like how they test for the sex of the baby and chromosomal abnormalities, those kinds of things through a blood test. But when she tested my blood right before we had him, yeah, there was a lot more. So that indicated to her that there was a hemorrhaging that happened. Somehow he lost a lot of blood really quickly. And so the explanation basically for that is just that instead of my placenta giving him nutrients in blood, it suddenly took blood from him, and like the process was reversed. They tested like my placenta, everything looked fine, everything came back normal. So really the explanation for the hemorrhaging is there is none. We don't know why that happened. I've seen maternal fetal medicine in Rochester, and they the doctor there, I think, just kind of explained it as like this was likely a very rare situation where your placenta maybe just did not develop properly from the beginning, and something just triggered it to malfunction, basically. So, not a great explanation.
No, not what you want to hear at all.
Yeah, I don't know what's worse, honestly. Like, I don't know if it's worse to have answers or to not have answers. It's not something that they were concerned about necessarily happening again, but they don't know either. So,
Right.
yeah, so it's a little bit of a mystery. But yeah, thankfully, I found a group of women. I was invited by somebody, like through somebody, somebody
Yep.
who knows somebody, and they invited me to this Facebook group that was local. So like I was joining these Facebook groups of like people who experience stillbirth and infant loss of like 10,000 people across the world, which is really impersonal. And you're listening to everybody's story or you're reading about everybody's story, but this was different because it was people in my community and a group of women that actually like got together in person. And so that was amazing. Like they invited me to one of their like group meetings, and I got to meet, I think there were probably six or seven other moms there who all told their stories about their losses. And it was like just such a safe haven for me. And I never thought that I was going to find people who had gone through and felt the way that I felt at that moment.
Mhm.
There's nothing like more impactful, I feel like, than finding community in
Yep.
that. And so yeah, they were really, really helpful. There were like so many thoughts that you have and dark thoughts. I'm sure that this is with any loss, but I was like angry at everyone who was pregnant and everyone who got to keep their babies and I didn't. And I obviously questioned like why did they get to have a baby and I don't? And so yeah, there was so much anger and hate, and I am not that person, you
I was
know.
just gonna say, and anybody who knows you knows you're just like this ray of sunshine and like bubbles and rainbows that is like around in the world. And so like, yeah, because I mean, I shared earlier in this season of the podcast that I lost a baby. And so I lost my baby shortly before you did. And I actually unfollowed you while you were pregnant because I was like, it's not fair that she's pregnant. And then you lost your baby. And so, like, totally been there, get what you were going through.
Yeah.
So, anger, where else were you at mentally, emotionally before you found community? Because community is really powerful. And so,
Yeah.
prior to that, what was your outlook on things like?
I mean, I think I was just so like immersed in this loss. So I was just reading everything I could about fetal maternal hemorrhaging. I was just like deep diving. I, we're both mental health professionals. And so I think I knew like what I needed to do, thankfully, to keep my sanity. So, I was reading books on loss. I was, reading books on like marriages after loss and those kinds of things to try to relate to other people and also kind of do some self-help.
Did your
Dan,
marriage struggle after loss? I know, like, that can be losing a child can be one of the major causes of divorce.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that Like, we were pretty good, honestly. I read a book called Holding On to Love After You've Lost a Baby, and it was actually co-written by Gary Chapman, who writes the Five
Mhm.
Love Languages, and a lady who had lost her baby. And so it kind of interwoven the love languages with grief and loss, and talked a lot about how like men and women grieve differently. And I think that that was just helpful for me to be aware of during that time, that he wasn't going to grieve the same way that I was. And again, I feel like finding people that I could talk to about my loss was, or our loss was really helpful, because I don't think, like, I didn't have to rely on him solely to be that support person for me. You know, I had other people that I could turn to and other people I could go to, because that's what I needed at that time. So that was really helpful. Both him and I were on the same page as far as like we wanted to have another baby as soon as possible. And I think there at the time there was a piece of like we need to just like move on. We need to make up for this loss. We need to, you know, start our family and like move forward. Knowing now, like that's not how it works. You are gonna
Right.
continue
Right.
grieve and it's not gonna go away. And you know, you're still going to have so much love for your baby, you know, that you lost. But in our minds, we were like, that's just what's going to make it better, is if we just get pregnant again and we have another baby and we have something else to focus on. So we were able to start trying. I think my doctor said like 6 months after, something like that. Or maybe it was actually like 3 months. She had said, you need to wait at least 3 months or something. And so we started trying again when we could. And it took a little bit longer because, well, I don't know why, but I do think it was because we were so stressed out about it. Like I was
Mhm.
obsessed. I was tracking everything and, you know, just like doing everything we could to make the odds in our favor, basically. But about 6 months after Cal passed away, we did get pregnant again. And that pregnancy was really hard because it was just mentally exhausting and draining, because every single step of the way, I basically thought like death was around the corner. You know, it's so hard to believe that you're going to have a healthy living baby after you experience that, that was almost like out of, like, that was the more likely outcome for me at that time than to have a healthy living baby.
Did you take differently in your second pregnancy compared to your first?
Well, I was considered a high risk pregnancy, so I was able to go in a lot more. At least I was scheduled to go in more, but I went in more than even I was scheduled for. I mean, I was probably at the doctor's every 2 weeks. Like I just I could not function if I, you know, there were points I would say where I couldn't function unless I knew that the baby was still alive. And my doctor and care team were amazing. Like they never questioned me on coming in. They never hesitated. They always just said, "Yep, come on in. We can get you in at this time." You know, so
Did you
um,
have the same team?
yeah, I kept my same doctor. I, you know, I'm I'm a caring person, and like I actually checked in on her. Like I was like, "How are you doing?" She's kind of a younger doctor, and so I think that that was her first like baby loss that was that far along. That was like a full term stillbirth, and so I knew that it like probably wasn't easy on her either, you know. And so I feel like she did everything right and everything that they could. There was no indication that anything was wrong. And so I didn't place any blame on like the medical team or system or anything like that. I know that that's not other people's stories. I know that other moms have gone in, you know, with concerns and felt really pushed off. And so, you know, I think that that's a whole nother layer of like grief, but I felt really good about my team. I was really thankful for her, and yeah, I've kept her for my pregnancies. I got a Doppler and like listened to the baby's heartbeat every day, when I could at home. And so things like that, that just I needed those reassurances throughout. And so yeah, it was way different. Like it completely changes your perspective on like getting pregnant, being pregnant, having a baby. Like everything is so different,
Mm.
And so I think thankfully, like it's made me more aware. I remember talking to before we ever even got pregnant with Cal, one of our neighbors actually lost a baby at 25 weeks. And I remember saying something to the effect of like, obviously I'm so sorry. Like, hopefully you guys can try again. And like now I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that to them. Like, that's such an insensitive thing to say, but you don't know until you've experienced that.
Right.
So yeah, it's changed a lot of things for us. But thankfully, Lenny was born in June of 2002 and she was healthy. And we decided to induce at 37 weeks because I just did not want to get close to that 38-week mark at all. And so, yeah, I also like took all the epidural drugs, everything. I was like, I don't need to have a natural birth. That's for the birds. Like, I don't need to do that. I I think too, like even being able to plan was hard, because
Mhm.
I didn't even know if she was gonna come, you know, alive. And so I didn't do as much planning, those kinds of things for her. I just kind of took it a day at a time.
Do you
Oh.
have feelings or judgments about the fact that you didn't do as much planning for Lenny as Cal?
No, I think that that's just natural. I think there's a piece too that I've heard from other parents, and now I'm kind of experiencing it myself of like most parents, when they have their second, it's not, there isn't as much planning and there isn't as much thought because, they're distracted. And so I kind of played it out like that too, of like, I'm honoring Cal while I'm pregnant with my second child too, so I am distracted and I am still giving love and attention to Cal. So there were obviously like hard things along the way of just like going through his clothes and making the nursery a little bit more hers. It's still very neutral and it's still like the same colors and everything, but we did do, we switched things up a little bit to make it more girly. And I think we did things in our own time for sure when we were ready for it. So yeah, I think that so much has changed since then. While I was pregnant with Lenny, we decided to start a bookshelf for the hospital. So we started Cal's Corner and we brought it there. Let's see, I think it was January of 2022. So a little bit before his first birthday, we were able to establish Cal's Corner there, which is basically a traveling bookshelf that's filled with like favorite books, lots of grief and loss books, all children's books for families to read with their babies after they've experienced a loss. And so, I think thinking about our time in the hospital, you would ask me like what other memories and what other things did we do with him? And I just was thinking of at that time, how can we help families create more memories and make that experience, just memorable and give them something to do rather than like just crying and holding your
Yeah.
baby. So yeah, we brought that there and it's been really great, I think, for families. I've had a couple of moms reach out to me since then who've used it and have really appreciated it. I also think another thing that sticks with me is the basket I received had like other people's names on all of the things, like in memory of their babies. And
Oh my goodness, that is so sweet.
it at the time made me feel like, okay, other people have done this. Like other people have experienced this. And that was something that, you know, you feel so alone at the time. But even just seeing like, okay, other women have gone through this and they survived was an eye opener for me, and just like got me through the day, I feel like.
And not only that, but like your baby isn't alone. Like your
Yeah,
baby is in good company. It was like where my head went, oh my gosh, that makes me want to cry.
yeah, yeah. So I think too, it's just another reminder to parents when they're in the hospital and going through that immense loss and that terrible experience, that they can see, yeah, that their baby's not alone and that they aren't alone, that people come out of this on the other side okay, because when you're in that moment, you don't feel like you can ever be okay, and nothing will be ever okay again.
Right.
So so yeah, we were actually able to bring a second bookshelf to the Rochester Hospital. Rochester has a little bit of a special place in our heart too, because we saw MFM when I was pregnant with Lenny there. And their doctors and their team are just like the most amazing people ever. So yeah, we were able to bring one to the Mayo Hospital there as well on Cal's second birthday, actually. So that was really cool. So yeah, those are just a couple things that we've done. And yeah, Lenny is almost 2. She'll be 2 in June, and we're expecting another baby this March, so just in about a month. And this baby will be born really close to Cal's birthday, which will be, at least that's what's planned, that, yeah, he'll be born really close to Cal's birthday. So that's kind of weird, but I think that that's just kind of, again, the way that it works, and you can't really plan for for these things. So
Right.
yeah, we're excited.
What would you say to a mom in the thick of it right now, or to younger you in the hospital or right after leaving the hospital?
Yeah, there's so many things. I think, there is not anything you can say that's going to take away that pain at that moment. Think the only thing that I can say is that, like, you will see the other side of this. Cal is always with us, and he's always going to be our first baby, and there's always going to be so much love for him. I think that now he is like part of our story, right? And he's part of our lives, and I can't honestly imagine it. I can't say I can't imagine it in any other way, because I guess I definitely could imagine him being there and a part of our family. But I think that, you know, he has created this life for us that wouldn't be the way it is if he hadn't come into our lives, I guess. I don't say things happen for a reason, because I think that's ridiculous. There's
Babies don't need to die. That is
yes,
complete and utter bullshit. But like you and I were
yeah.
talking about before we started recording this call, like my baby loss made me an incredibly patient mom for Bridger, for my second child. And so like it's such a beautiful gift that Evelyn gave her brother,
Mhm.
by leaving too soon. And I would do anything to have her here. And she gave the greatest gift that she could ever give.
Yes, 100%. That's 100% how I feel. I think, yeah, I can see him a part of our family. I can, he would be 3 next month, so, I think he'd have been a really great big brother for Lenny. But yeah, he gave Lenny and our future children like an amazing gift of just, we will now forever do things differently. And one thing that, I think I was kind of navigating while I was pregnant with Lenny was like, how do we talk to her about her brother?
Mhm.
How do we incorporate him into our family moving forward? I think you have a lot, you have a lot of time to focus that first year, usually on like all of the traditions and all the things that you want to do for your baby, and things do change over time. We'll be going on 3 years next month, and there are still traditions and things I want to do, but it has changed, right? Like we can't necessarily beat ourselves up if we don't get to everything that we wanted to do that year for him, or those ways we wanted to honor him. But some things that we've done are like, we have a tree in a park that's really close to our house actually for him, and every year we put up Christmas lights on the tree. And so I just think like, years from now, that's going to be something that we're going to take our kids, and we're going to do that as a family. And that's always going to be a way to honor him, around the holidays. And so, yeah, what I was going to say, I guess my point was that I feel like our children are going to get like more exposure and education on loss than most adults get. And I think
Correct.
that that's something that is really special, because it's such an uncomfortable thing for even adults to talk about. And
It
the
doesn't need to be.
well, right. And it shouldn't be,
Mhm.
and so I just think like Lenny is gonna probably walk into kindergarten and be like, "Oh yeah, and I do have an older brother who's dead," and like just say
Yes.
how it
Yes.
is. And and I think like there's just such a gift in that children, they adapt really well, and it's just going to be he's going to be a part of their lives. Probably not, he's not going to be in the same way that a living sibling would be, but he'll be there. So
How about advice for the support people of the person or people who have experienced the child baby loss? What would you say to them? How can they show up and support?
yeah, I think the tough one. I think the best thing that people can say to somebody who has lost a baby is like, I don't know how you're feeling and I don't know what to say to you right now, but I'm just so sorry and I'm here. Like, to
Mhm.
admit that you are uncomfortable or admit that you don't have the right words is better than saying something that's ridiculous, you know? And so I feel like the people who showed up and were really authentic just didn't say anything. And that was better, than saying things that are corny and, like, so sorry for your loss, or, I don't know, just all of the
They're
things
in a
that you
better
hear.
place.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens for a reason. There's God has a plan. Like all of those things are just not helpful, you
Nope.
know. And I think I, you know, there was definitely a point where I was like angry with people, and you are gonna, you're gonna do what you need to do to survive, and you're gonna like say that you hate what they said or whatever. I think now I know that, I can forgive those people for not knowing what to say, and I can forgive that. But yeah, that's definitely the advice I would give. I just remember, oh, like it's weird because there's people, and I'm sure you experience this too, but like there's people that you just feel like genuine, empathy, like that they feel it with you, and then there's people that just don't, and you're just kind of like, not really interested in like entertaining this relationship. But one of my coworkers, I remember she was pregnant at the same time as me, and she came over and she was just crying, and she just said she was pregnant with her second. And so she just said, I just wish that I just wish it could be me. And I was like, obviously, you never want anyone to experience
Right.
what you experience, but like for her to say that and be pregnant, and like those words were just like, oh my gosh, you're feeling so much empathy for me, And
Yes.
like she is such a good friend. And I feel like that was like the most genuine and empathetic thing that someone could have expressed at that time, you know?
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like my grief has really highlighted the people that showed up and the people who didn't show up.
Yeah.
And it's like a list that I can't forget. And so, like, the people who didn't say anything but sent a meal or sent a gift card or texted and said, I'm here, don't respond, but I'm here for you. Like, I remember that. And all of the texts or meals I didn't get, like, I remember the people who didn't send those. And I really, really, really wish I could forget it.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. And that's another thing that like what a gift to us to like know, you know, what to do in those
Right.
situations, and
Yes.
just like sending something, anything is better than silence, you know, in yeah, in those moments of just like
Because it feels like people don't want to get your grief on them. Like, it almost feels like they look at you like a contagion or a disease or something, and they don't want to get too close. And it's like, that's the last thing you need in those moments.
right. Especially baby loss. Like for some
Yes.
reason, it's something that people, yeah, like it's like it's contagious. Like they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it because they never want it to happen to them. And they don't even like even the reality that it could happen to them is way too far out of reach, you know? And I remember that feeling. I remember feeling that, being that person, you know, like even like thinking about your loss at the time, like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible and that's so sad. But then like you move forward. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you don't continue to think about it. Like we were pregnant at the same time, and it's still knowing that you had a stillbirth. I
Hmm.
still, it never crossed my mind that like that would happen to me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so it's kind of crazy. And I think that that is why it's so important to continue to talk about our losses. And it's important to continue to talk about our babies, even if it makes people feel uncomfortable, because it's never going to make you feel worse than it makes me feel. So,
Correct. And if you get to talk about your living children, I get to talk about my children in the same way, whether they are alive or not.
yes, exactly. I have like thought about there's so many awkward situations that I've had, like, because I am not usually I'm not a person to shy away from those uncomfortable conversations. And like, you know, you go through periods of guilt of like, if you don't mention your baby, you feel guilty, you
Oh,
know.
fuck. Yes. PE classes. I'm always like, when they're like, tell us about your family, it's like, okay, do I be the person that like brings the room down? Is like, I lost a baby and here's my other living child. Like, oh my gosh.
Right?
Yes. It's such a stressful situation that people don't think about.
No. And I think that we all have the right to like it's our story. So we all have the right to bring up our
Mhm.
babies when we want, and you know what I mean? Like there's no pressure there if people decide not to in a moment. Like that's your choice. But like I have brought up Cal in like the weirdest situations. Like I started at a new school, and like I was walking out of the building with another teacher that I don't know at all really, and he was just making conversation like, "Oh yeah, is like she your only child?" And I was like, "Actually, we had a son who was stillborn at 38 weeks. So we actually have two." And he was just like, "Oh, okay, have a good day." You know, like
Yes, yes.
splitting apart in the parking lot. It was just like such a weird time to bring it up, but I'm like, you know, this is my reality and this is my life. And if it makes you
100%.
uncomfortable, whatever.
Not your problem. Not your
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just, yeah, I don't know. I'll bring him up in most situations. I mean, there are times where, yeah, I don't feel like the lady at TJ Maxx gets to know about my story, you know, whatever. But yeah, it's awkward.
Yeah, it's if you wanna make I kind of distinguished, like, if I wanna make a relationship with you or, like, there's potential that I wanna continue a relationship with you, I'm gonna tell you about my child. If you are the maintenance man coming to fix my door or something, like, and you ask me if I have kids, probably not gonna tell you that I lost one and I have a living one, like,
Right.
that's just not gonna happen.
Exactly. Yep, for sure. So,
Becca, thank you so much for sharing Cal with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for like letting me tell my story. And, I love talking about him.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I know that the topics that we talk about on this podcast can be heavy and bring up a lot of emotions for people, and that's no reason to shy away from these conversations. If you're a fan of trying to get these conversations out to as many people as possible, I could use your help. Rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast helps it reach more people. I always love to hear your feedback on the episodes that we put out and the topics that you want to hear more about. So head to www.redbirdcounselingnmn.com. From there, you can send me an email and join our online email community to get more updates about the podcast and everything happening mental health and Redbird counseling. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Redbird Counseling MN and Facebook Redbird Counseling MN 21. Until next time, remember, you're not alone, your story matters, be kind to yourself, and don't be afraid to color outside the lines.